On March 2nd, 2026, Iran launched one of the most significant military offensives in recent history, firing thousands of missiles and unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, at several Middle Eastern countries allied with the United States. These attacks marked a serious escalation in already strained relations between Iran and its adversaries, particularly the United States and Israel. The attacks were direct retaliation for the death of Ayatollah Khamenei, Iran's supreme leader, who was killed in a joint U.S.-Israeli airstrike. The attacks targeted both military and civilian infrastructure across 15 U.S. allied countries in the region, signaling a new phase in Iran's strategy to assert influence and retaliate against perceived acts of aggression. This event not only destabilized the region, but also escalated a broader geopolitical confrontation involving the U.S., Israel, and Iran, with potentially far-reaching consequences for global security and energy markets. The current escalation between Iran and Western powers, particularly the United States and Israel, has deep historical roots. Since the Islamic Revolution of 1979, Iran has maintained a contentious relationship with the U.S. and other Western nations due to ideological differences and Tehran's criticism of foreign intervention in the region. However, such tensions reached a new level when the U.S. withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal in 2018, setting off a chain of military and diplomatic actions that strained relations even further. The Trump administration's maximum pressure campaign, which involved reimposing sanctions on Iran and targeting key figures in the Iranian government, led to retaliatory actions by Tehran. The turning point came in February 2026, when Ayatollah Khamenei, Iran's spiritual and political leader, was killed in an airstrike coordinated by the U.S. and Israel. This event triggered an immediate and intense response from Tehran, which vowed to take revenge for the loss of its leader. Iran's response was swift, launching a large-scale attack on U.S. military bases, regional allies, and strategic targets. The use of missiles and UAVs to strike at key infrastructure in allied countries marked a significant shift in the conflict, with implications not just for the Middle East, but for global energy security and international relations. Iran's response to the death of Ayatollah Khamenei was designed to send a strong message of defiance and retaliation. On March 2nd, 2026, Iranian military officials confirmed the launch of over 500 UAVs and 150 ballistic missiles aimed at strategic sites in 15 U.S. allied countries in the Middle East. The majority of the attacks were concentrated in countries where the U.S. has significant military bases or strong diplomatic ties. The countries that were targeted included Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, UAE, and Israel. Iran claimed that these attacks were aimed at military targets such as air bases, military compounds, and missile defense systems. However, Tehran also targeted civilian infrastructure, including airports, ports, and key buildings in cities like Dubai, Doha, Jerusalem, and Tel Aviv. These strikes caused significant damage to both military and civilian infrastructure, leading to casualties and widespread panic. Iran's missile and UAV attacks were a direct response to the killing of its leader, but they were also part of a broader strategy to challenge the U.S. and Israel's military presence in the region. By targeting U.S. military bases and key allies, Iran sought to undermine the credibility of the U.S. as a security provider in the region, particularly in countries that rely heavily on American military support. Several countries were directly targeted by Iran's missile and UAV attacks. Among the most affected were Israel, a longtime adversary of Iran, was one of the primary targets of the missile and UAV strikes. Iranian missiles hit Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and several military bases across the country. The Negev military base, where U.S. forces were stationed, was heavily damaged, and dozens of U.S. and Israeli soldiers were reported dead. The attack on Israel was seen as a clear signal from Tehran, aimed at retaliating for its military actions and sending a warning to both Israel and its allies. The UAE was another major target of the attacks. Dubai and Abu Dhabi, two of the most important cities in the UAE, suffered multiple missile strikes, causing significant destruction. These cities house critical infrastructure, including major airports and seaports that are vital for trade and transportation in the region. The attacks forced the closure of airports, paralyzed transportation networks, and led to widespread economic disruption. The UAE is a key ally of the U.S. and serves as a host for several American military bases, making it a significant target for Iran in its efforts to challenge U.S. influence in the region. Qatar, home to Al Udeid Air Base, the largest U.S. military base in the Middle East, also came under heavy attack. The base was targeted by Iranian missiles and UAVs, severely damaging its infrastructure and forcing the U.S. to temporarily relocate some personnel and equipment. The attacks on Al Udeid had a strategic impact, as it serves as a critical hub for U.S. operations in the Middle East, particularly in Syria and Afghanistan. Qatar's international airport was also struck, causing widespread chaos and halting international flights for several days. Saudi Arabia say, although not directly attacked, was indirectly affected by the conflict. Iranian-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen, supported by Tehran, launched additional attacks on Saudi targets. Moreover, several Saudi oil facilities and refineries were damaged as a result of regional instability. The disruptions caused by these strikes had a ripple effect on the global oil market, with prices spiking due to concerns over supply disruptions. Saudi Arabia, which hosts a large U.S. military presence, also faced increased security challenges in the wake of the attacks. Bahrain, a smaller but strategically important country in the Gulf, was also targeted. Manama, the capital of Bahrain, and key military installations were hit by missiles and UAVs. Bahrain hosts the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet, a vital part of the U.S. military's presence in the Persian Gulf. The attacks disrupted military operations and led to an increase in tensions within the country, which has long relied on U.S. military support for its security. Other affected countries. Other countries in the region, such as Kuwait, Lebanon, Iraq, Jordan, Turkey, Egypt, and Cyprus, were either directly or indirectly affected by Iran's attacks. U.S. military bases in these countries were put on high alert, and civilian infrastructure was targeted. The strikes resulted in the loss of life, economic damage, and disruption to daily activities in these nations, as they found themselves caught in the crossfire of a larger geopolitical struggle. Iran's strategic objectives. Iran's missile and UAV attacks were not just about retaliation, they were part of a broader strategic goal. By targeting both military and civilian infrastructure, Iran aimed to achieve several objectives. Weaken the U.S.-Israel alliance. Iran's primary goal was to undermine the U.S.-Israel alliance, which it views as the primary threat to its regional influence. By attacking U.S. military bases and allies in the Gulf, Iran sought to weaken the perception of U.S. military dominance in the region. Disrupt the global oil market. Iran targeted critical oil infrastructure in the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar in an effort to disrupt global energy supplies. The attacks sent shockwaves through the global oil market, causing a spike in prices and highlighting the region's vulnerability to instability. Increase regional influence. By attacking U.S. allies, Iran aimed to shift the balance of power in the region. The attacks were designed to force countries in the Gulf and beyond to reconsider their reliance on the U.S. for security and defense, potentially leading to a realignment of alliances. Regional impact. Iran's attacks have had a profound impact on the region. The conflict has sparked a broader security crisis in the Middle East, with countries like Iraq and Syria facing further destabilization. While many of the nations targeted by Iran's strikes are already dealing with internal conflicts and economic instability, the new wave of violence and destruction has deepened the humanitarian crisis and created new challenges for international peacekeepers and aid organizations. The attacks also raised critical questions about the future of U.S. military presence in the Middle East. While the U.S. has long been the primary guarantor of security in the region, the attacks on its bases and allies have led some to question whether the U.S. can maintain its role as a stabilizing force. This could lead to a shift in regional power dynamics and force countries to seek independent security solutions. International reactions. The international community has largely condemned Iran's actions, with major powers such as the US, the UK, France, and Russia denouncing the strikes as an act of aggression. However, the global response has been mixed, and with some countries, including Russia and China, calling for diplomatic dialogue rather than further military escalation. The U.S. has vowed to continue its military efforts in the region, reinforcing its presence and imposing additional sanctions on Iran. NATO has also expressed concerns about the potential for further escalation and called for a de-escalation of tensions. Meanwhile, Here, Middle Eastern countries find themselves torn between maintaining ties with the U.S. and pursuing diplomatic solutions that could avoid further violence. Conclusion: Iran's missile and UAV strikes have significantly escalated the conflict in the Middle East, with far-reaching consequences for both regional and global security. The attacks have undermined U.S. influence, created economic instability, and raised serious questions about the future of international alliances. While Iran's actions may have been motivated by retaliation, the long-term implications of these strikes will continue to reverberate across the region. As the conflict unfolds, it is clear that the Middle East is facing a new era of uncertainty, with the potential for further escalation and geopolitical shifts.